just finished rereading Sense and Sensibility because I'm working on a novel that has some Austen themes in it. And I want to talk about the way in which in that book and in much of Austen's oeuvre, the most dangerous thing you can have is an unmarried girl. It's the thing that upends the whole society. Because of course, these are at their core stories about love, romance, and family, and class. And in these stories, the unmarried girl is a thing that could upend your whole system. So I'm going to break down how and why unmarried girls are so dangerous in Sense and Sensibility. As I'm guessing many of you know, in Sense and Sensibility, we have chiefly two sisters. There's a little one named Margaret, but she doesn't play much of a role. We have Elinor and Marianne Dashwood, who have just lost their father, and their brother is pretty selfish and his wife Fanny is even more selfish and doesn't give them any of the money that the father was hoping they would have. So these three young girls and their mother end up moving with a cousin of the mother in order to sort of find their way again, because they've lost their house, they've lost everything. And what happens, of course, is that the two older sisters are beautiful and smart and kind and interesting and different in their own ways. Marianne is very passionate and has all sorts of ideas about how she's going to act and how people should behave toward her and all those things. And Elinor is a lot more quiet and reserved and thoughtful. But they're both just great catches. You want these girls in your life, but they have very little money, which means that the whole plot of this book hinges upon these two women attracting all these men and the family just losing their minds about the fact that, oh no, these guys are going to end up marrying these delightful humans who come with no money. So why is that a problem, that you would marry someone who doesn't have that much money? That's still something that we think about today, but we in today's society have at least the mystery of the possibility of upward mobility. Whereas in the Regency period, that was not a thing. You were born with a fixed income. And that's the amount of money that you had if you were part of the gentry, the nobility, which is the group that Austen belonged to and that she writes about. So if you have a fixed amount of income and that's about what you're going to have for the rest of your life, and somebody marries somebody who doesn't have that much money, then the whole income of your descendants is going to fall apart. So it's an interesting study in what happens when your income is static, and the only way that you can raise or lower it, well, you can lower it by wasting your money, but the only way that you can honestly raise it is through marriage. And there's always in these books some heiresses that have a lot of money, but the guys don't want them. They want our protagonists who don't have money, but they are so deeply ingrained in their goodness and their charm and all the things that you would actually want in a partner. So that's one of the great things that Austen uses as a conflict, right? As a motor for her conflict, is what happens when everybody falls in love with these people who have no money and yet promise you all sorts of happiness. Unmarried girls are a particular threat to society in Sense and Sensibility because they represent a possibility of distraction and company and love and entertainment in a society that doesn't have a lot of options for that. Particularly for the gentry, they didn't really work, right? There wasn't a lot of I'm gonna go to my 9 to 5 or do any of those things, right? You basically just sort of hung out and you went to one place and you went to the other, and yes, you looked after your estate, but you didn't have the thing that we have where we're trying to, get things done, and that's entertaining or keeps us busy. Hopefully your job is entertaining. But you also then have no phones, no TV, no radio, very little theater depending on where you lived, right? So all of these things that we do in order to entertain ourselves when things are quiet and there's nothing to do, they didn't have that. They had to figure out how to entertain themselves, and yes, you could go on walks and you could go hunting and you could do all those things, but mostly you were going to have to talk to each other. They didn't even have that many books. It was really hard to get books. So you are faced with the challenge every day of figuring out how to make those hours go by in a way that's interesting, and there's very little distraction around. But if you're a single man and there's this beautiful and smart and brilliant and funny and delightful unmarried girl, that becomes a great source of distraction and entertainment and delight. And that's all well and good if they have enough money. But in the book, a lot of the conflicts are, oh my God, they keep following these guys, Willoughby and Colonel Brandon and Edward, all of these guys, they just keep falling for these sisters that have everything you want except for money. And in a world in which there is nothing else to distract you, the ability to connect with your partner, right? And to speak with them and to find a way to feel elated or elevated by your conversations is key. So in a way, the book, I think one of the reasons why we love this world so much is that it reminds us of something that we have lost by gaining all this entertainment, which is our need and ability to depend on each other for connection and love. Unmarried Girls are particularly dangerous in Sense and Sensibility and much of Austen's world, because once you get married, you're not going to get divorced. She might die during childbirth, and a lot of women die during childbirth in that era, though not so much in Austen's world, because Austen's world is happy and women dying in childbirth, not something we want to think about when we're trying to feel like we're being swept into a delightful universe. But the truth of the matter is that when you got married, that was it. You had found your person, and you didn't get to, sleep with them. Willoughby does sleep with somebody that he's not married to in this book, and then she gets pregnant, and there's all sorts of drama about that, but that's not the girl you're gonna marry, right? The moment the girl slept with you, you were not going to marry her. So the divorce is not an option, and marriage is basically forever, but you don't get to spend that much time getting to know this person to decide whether or not they're the person you want to spend the rest of your life with, which makes the very, like Elinor and Marianne, who are so just brilliant and brimming with life and insight and observations that are fun to listen to, even more dangerous, because if you're a guy and you're trying to decide how in the world you're going to find a mate for the rest of your life, and you find these girls who are just so smart and enticing, of course you want to be with them, which then makes you make some crazy decisions like not marry the woman with the 30,000 pounds, and it puts your family on edge. But it's an interesting world for us to think about as we read it today. And of course, the fact that there is no divorce makes it, raises the stakes, right? It's like, ooh, more romantic, and you get this sense that 50% of the marriages are not going to end up divorce because they can't. But it also makes these women a lot more worrisome to everybody else who's hoping that their boys will marry rich women. In Sense and Sensibility, Unmarried Girls are particularly dangerous because families were different from the way we think about family today. I think there's all sorts of jokes today about, oh, Thanksgiving, how are you going to talk to your relatives who have different political leanings and so on and so forth, right? There's this, we have scattered professionally and in all sorts of ways, so that for us, our relatives are people that we don't see that often, and sometimes we might not see them for years. Those of us who have moved across countries, they're not that present in our life. But in Austen's world, you do see your relatives very often, and they even, like, once you marry somebody, you call your mother-in-law my mother, and you call the, you know, like, it's such a blend of families in a way that if you're not satisfied with the person that your son or daughter is marrying, you're going to have to deal with that person really becoming part of who you are as a human being. They like get woven into the fabric of your life in a way that for many of us today, that's not the case. So once again, having these impoverished, right? Because they weren't, you know, they don't have that much money, but they have all the education and all the charm and all the things that you want in a spouse, sort of infiltrate herself into what you were hoping was going to be a family that was going to move up the ranks. Because that's the other thing about Austen, is that social class is so important in ways that I think are hard for us to understand today, even though it still matters today. You know, marriage isn't just about making more money, it's also about moving up as, you know, the social ladder, because that's, if all you're doing is socializing, you want to be up the ladder. So even though these girls like Marianne and Elinor would be much better company, would have much more interesting things to say to you, you'd rather have somebody that doesn't have much to contribute, but that moves you up. So there you go. As you think about Austen and, you know, our delightful Sense and Sensibility protagonists, it's a good idea to remember that this book has withstood the test of time, exactly, I think, because of course it has some really universal themes, but also because the time is fascinating in which it takes place, with all the conflicts and all the things that are keeping people apart and pushing people together. It gets us to think about what we're living through today in new ways, and it also touches us in the things that we all, I think, still want, which is love and connection and family, whether we see them at Thanksgiving only or whether we see them all the time. Let me know what you think. Do you agree? Have you read or reread Sense and Sensibility? What are your thoughts on Austen? And what do you think about the world? Tell me your thoughts, and please subscribe, like, and share. And keep reading.